Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at aging alone in 2025.
Okay.
We found a really insightful article
All
that
right.
explores this and all the challenges and opportunities that come with it, especially, with solitude being such a big part of the picture.
Yeah.
And I think the really cool thing about this article is that it tries to frame this whole thing
Yeah.
as a time for like self-discovery and peace and, really finding yourself in a new way.
Yeah, it is interesting how they kind of flip the script on how we usually think about aging, right?
Right.
Usually it's all doom and gloom. But this article, like you said, talks about the opportunities that come with it.
Totally.
I think one of the things that really jumped out at me was how they talked about technology and its role in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So the double-edged sword in a way.
Right.
It can connect us, but also make us feel more isolated,
Yeah.
especially for older adults who might not be as comfortable with all the latest gadgets and apps and everything.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
we're always told to stay connected, but no one really tells us how to do that in a way that actually feels meaningful.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I found really interesting is how the article talked about the difference between solitude and loneliness. Like that describe loneliness as this heavy weight,
Mm-hmm.
but solitude is more like a space for self-discovery. And it's such a critical distinction to make.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, those two things can feel so different.
Yes.
And recognizing that difference is huge.
Yeah.
It's not just about being physically alone.
Right.
It's about how we view those moments of solitude.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that shift yourself?
Yeah.
Like going from feeling lonely to finding peace in being alone?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've had times when I felt that weight of loneliness,
Mhm.
But when I shifted my focus to things I actually enjoy doing,
Yeah.
like spending time in nature or getting lost in a good book,
Mhm.
it totally changed things.
Right.
It became this time for reflection and even creativity. The article also talks about how aging alone in 2025 comes with its own unique challenges, especially when it comes to technology.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they point out that the rise of digital communication can be a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Younger generations are constantly connected through texting, social media, and video calls,
Right.
which is great for staying in touch, but it also creates this gap for older adults who might not be as tech savvy.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if we're losing out on those face-to-face interactions and even just the simple joy of a phone call.
You're right. It's like we're trading depth for convenience in a way.
Exactly.
And then there's the whole emphasis on independence these days,
Mm.
which can be empowering, but it also can lead to less intergenerational support.
Right, like families aren't always living close to each other anymore.
Exactly. Like the article mentions, families being spread out across continents.
Right.
It's not as easy to just pop in for a visit or offer help on a daily basis.
Yeah, it definitely makes things more challenging, but the article doesn't paint a totally bleak picture either.
No, not at all.
They actually suggest that technology can also be a tool for fighting loneliness.
Yeah, it's not about getting rid of technology altogether,
Right.
but rather using it strategically to connect with others. What are some of the specific examples they mention?
Well, one that comes to mind is using video calls to stay in touch with family and friends who live far away.
Hmm.
It's not the same as being there in person, but at least you can see their faces and have those real-time conversations.
Right. It can help bridge the distance in a way.
Yeah, and what about online communities?
Oh, yeah. Those can be great, too.
The article talks about them as well.
They can offer a sense of belonging and shared interests, which can be huge for older adults who might be feeling isolated.
It's like having a virtual club where you can connect with people who share your passions.
Exactly. And there are online communities for just about everything these days.
Yeah, you can find groups for any hobby or interest you can imagine. Have you ever joined an online community that you found helpful or enriching?
I actually have. I joined an online book club a few months back.
Cool.
It's been a great way to connect with other readers, discuss different perspectives, and discover new authors.
It's amazing how technology can open up those new avenues for connection and learning.
It really is. And then there's the whole thing about AI companions, which sounds super futuristic.
I know, right? That one really caught my eye.
It's definitely an area that's still developing, but the article suggests that AI could play a bigger role in providing companionship and support for older adults, especially those living alone.
How do you see that playing out in real life, though?
Well, imagine having an AI companion that could remind you to take your medication or help you schedule appointments or even just have a conversation with you. It wouldn't replace human connection, but it could provide a sense of presence and support.
I can see that being helpful for people who don't have a large social network.
Yeah.
But the article also stresses that technology should be a tool, not a replacement for real human connection.
Mm-hmm. It's all about balance.
It's about finding that sweet spot where technology enhances our lives and connections,
Right.
rather than making us feel more isolated. So how do you see that balance playing out in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it'll be an ongoing conversation, and we'll need to keep figuring it out as technology evolves. But the key is to use it in a way that supports our well-being.
Makes sense. And on that note, the article also talks about the importance of having a sense of purpose and routine in our lives as we age.
Right. Having a reason to get out of bed in the morning is so important.
Totally.
It helps fight off those feelings of emptiness or lack of direction that can sometimes creep in when you're living alone.
I can definitely relate to that. When I have a routine, I feel more energized and motivated.
Me too. It gives you a framework for your day.
So what kind of strategies does the article suggest for building a positive routine?
Well, one suggestion is to start the day with an intentional practice.
Okay.
It could be anything from enjoying a cup of tea in a quiet corner to doing some gentle stretching or listening to some uplifting music.
I love that.
It's about setting a positive tone for the day.
Yeah, those little rituals can make a big difference.
They can. And of course, engaging in hobbies and passions is another big one.
That's a must for me.
What are some things you enjoy doing?
Oh, I love spending time in my garden, painting, writing, even just puttering around the house.
Those are all great.
It's like time melts away when I'm doing something I love.
Exactly. And the article talks about finding activities that bring you joy and stimulate your mind. They mention a whole bunch of examples like cooking, learning a new language, or even taking up a musical instrument.
The possibilities are endless, really.
They are. It's about finding what lights you up and makes you feel alive.
And it doesn't have to be something complicated.
Right.
Even simple things like reading, spending time in nature, or listening to music can be really nourishing.
Absolutely. The goal isn't to fill every moment with activity. It's about finding a balance between activity rest and social interaction.
Finding that rhythm to your day.
Exactly.
And-
So what about social interaction?
Well, the article talks about the importance of nurturing meaningful relationships, even if those relationships have changed over time.
Mm-hmm. It's about quality over quantity when it comes to social connection.
It's easy to get caught up in the number of friends or followers we have, but it's the depth of those connections that truly matters.
So true. So what are some tips the article gives for deepening those relationships?
Well, one thing they suggest is having deeper conversations that go beyond small talk.
Mhm.
Really listen to what the other person is saying and share your own thoughts and feelings authentically.
Those are great tips.
And even simple things like handwritten letters or phone calls can add that personal touch that's often missing in our digital communication.
Absolutely. The article reminds us that even small gestures can mean a lot.
Yeah, like sending a thoughtful card, leaving a voice message, or just taking the time to really listen to someone who needs to talk,
Those acts of kindness can make a world of difference.
especially for someone who's feeling isolated or alone.
Exactly. And speaking of reaching out, the article also talks about the power of giving back to our communities.
It's a powerful concept, for sure.
It is. The idea is that by helping others, we can actually combat loneliness
Yeah.
and create a sense of purpose.
I can see that. There's something fulfilling about using our talents to make a difference.
It shifts our focus outward, and that can bring a lot of joy and connection.
Yeah, it's like a win-win situation.
Exactly. And the article highlights how older adults can play a special role in this.
How so?
Well, they have so much experience and wisdom to share.
Right.
They can be incredible mentors and role models for younger generations.
It challenges that idea that aging makes us less valuable.
Exactly. So what are some examples of ways older adults can give back?
Well, the article mentions things like volunteering at local organizations, mentoring young people, or even just helping out neighbors in need.
Those are all great ways to make a difference.
It's about using our unique skills and experiences to contribute to the world around us.
And recognizing that we all have something to offer regardless of our age.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a really interesting point the article makes about challenging societal perceptions of aging.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. The article challenges the idea that aging is all about decline and irrelevance. Instead, they encourage us to see it as a time of continued growth, wisdom, and contribution.
It's about reframing aging as something to be celebrated, not feared.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways we can challenge those ageist attitudes, both in ourselves and in society as a whole?
Well, it starts with examining our own biases.
Hmm.
Do we unconsciously hold negative stereotypes about aging?
It's about becoming aware of those biases and actively challenging them.
Right. And it's also about speaking up when we encounter ageist language or behavior in others.
Yeah, we need to create a culture where aging is seen as a natural and valuable part of life.
Exactly. And speaking of creating a culture of inclusivity, the article also emphasizes the importance of intergenerational connection.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What does the article say about fostering connections between generations?
Well, they point out that our society has become increasingly age segregated,
Hmm.
with younger and older generations often living in separate worlds.
It's true. You don't see as much interaction between different age groups as you used to.
Right. And the article argues that this separation is harmful to both groups.
Yeah, we have so much to learn from each other.
We do. Younger generations can benefit from the wisdom and experience of their elders,
Mm.
and older adults can gain new perspectives and energy from interacting with younger people.
It's about bridging that generational divide and creating opportunities for meaningful connection and exchange.
Exactly. And that can happen in so many ways.
Like what?
Well, they mentioned things like mentoring programs, intergenerational living arrangements, and community initiatives that bring different age groups together.
I love that.
Even simple things like striking up a conversation with someone from a different generation can make a difference.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of the same human family, regardless of age.
Exactly.
And it's not just about family connections either, right?
No, not at all. Friendships, neighborly bonds, and community ties are all important,
Especially as we age.
right? Our needs and circumstances can change, and we may need to rely on a wider network for support and companionship.
So it's important to cultivate a diverse and supportive network throughout our lives.
Absolutely. Which leads to another key point the article makes about planning ahead for the later stages of life.
You're talking about being proactive and thinking about what kind of support we might need as we get older.
Exactly. It's about having conversations with loved ones about our wishes and preferences,
Yeah.
exploring different living arrangements, and putting legal and financial plans in place.
That can feel daunting, but it's important to be prepared.
It is. It's about taking control of our future and making choices that align with our values.
And it's not just about practical matters either, right?
You're right. It's also about thinking about how we want to spend our time and energy as we age.
Yeah.
What are our passions? What brings us joy? What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind?
Those are big questions.
They are, but they're worth considering.
Definitely. The answers can help us create a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Exactly. And it all comes back to the main message of the article.
Mm-hmm.
Aging alone doesn't have to be a time of isolation and despair. It can be an opportunity for growth, connection, and joy.
It's all about how we choose to approach it.
Exactly. We have more control over our experience than we might think.
And the article gives us some concrete steps we can take to create a more fulfilling experience.
Like what?
Well, they talk about embracing technology as a tool for connection, establishing a purposeful daily routine, and nurturing meaningful relationships.
Mm.
They also emphasize giving back to our communities and cultivating a sense of gratitude for the simple things in life.
It's a great roadmap for living a fulfilling life no matter what your age.
I agree. And I love how they end on a note of hope and connection. Me too, reminding us that in this vast world, none of us are truly alone.
It's a powerful message.
It is. And it leads us perfectly into the next section of the article, which focuses on the importance of challenging societal perceptions of aging.
That's a topic that's definitely ripe for discussion. Are you ready to dive into that?
Absolutely. Let's explore that further in the next part of our deep dive.
You know, it's funny how our culture often connects aging with decline and irrelevance. Like you're not as valuable once you hit a certain age.
It's so true.
But this article really challenges that whole idea.
Yeah, they make a strong argument for seeing aging as this time of growth, wisdom, and, still being able to contribute to the world.
Right. Like it's not the end. It's just a new chapter.
Exactly. They even call it a golden phase, which I love.
It is a nice way to put it. Like it's a time for exploration and self-discovery.
Have you ever encountered that kind of ageist thinking yourself?
Oh, definitely. I think we all have at some point. It's
Right.
pervasive.
It is. What's interesting is that the article suggests specific ways to make the most of this time. Like one thing that stood out to me was the emphasis on morning routines.
Yeah, they talk about that a lot.
Not just about structuring your day, but about setting the right tone from the very beginning.
Exactly. It's like creating a foundation for a more positive and fulfilling experience.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? What kind of morning routines did they suggest?
Well, they emphasize starting each day with an intentional practice, something that nourishes your mind, body, and spirit. It could be meditation journaling, a gentle yoga practice, or even just savoring a cup of coffee in a quiet corner.
Those are all great ideas.
It's about taking those few moments for yourself to center and ground yourself before the day gets going.
And those moments can have a ripple effect on the rest of your day.
They can. And then the article goes on to suggest using this time for activities that bring you joy,
Oh, yeah.
whether it's revisiting a hobby, learning a new skill, or getting lost in a creative pursuit. What are some things you've always wanted to try but haven't had the time for?
Oh, gosh, so many things. Learning to play the piano has always been a dream of mine, and I'd love to try pottery.
Those sound like great ideas.
The article really makes you want to go for it, not wait any longer.
It does. And it doesn't have to be about big ambitions either. Sometimes the simplest activities can bring the most joy,
True.
like spending time in nature, reading a good book, or listening to music that moves you.
It's about finding those little pockets of joy in the everyday.
Exactly. And the article also talks about the importance of nurturing our relationships, even if those relationships have changed over time.
Right, relationships evolve and people drift apart sometimes. It's just part of life.
It is. But it's about cherishing the connections that remain strong and finding ways to deepen them.
How can we do that?
Well, it could be as simple as making time for a phone call, writing a heartfelt letter, or planning a special outing together. The key is to be present and intentional in those interactions.
That makes sense. It's about quality time over quantity.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And it's also about letting go of unrealistic expectations, recognizing that not everyone can be there for us in the same way they were in the past.
That's a tough one, but so important.
It is. It's about focusing on who is present in our lives and appreciating those connections for what they are.
And on that note, the article brings up another important point, the power of giving back.
Yes, they suggest that acts of service can be a really powerful way to combat loneliness and find a sense of purpose.
I love that idea. It's so fulfilling to use your time and talents to make a difference in the world.
It is, and it creates this ripple effect.
How so?
Well, not only does giving back bring joy and purpose to the giver, it also spreads kindness and connection throughout the community.
I like that.
And the article highlights the unique role that older adults can play in this.
What do you mean?
Well, they have a wealth of experience, wisdom, and perspective to share that can be so valuable to younger generations.
It's like turning that stereotype on its head.
Exactly. It's not about being irrelevant. It's about being a source of guidance and support.
What are some specific ways that older adults can give back?
Well, the article mentions things like volunteering at local organizations, mentoring young people, or even just offering support to neighbors in need.
Those are all great ideas. It's about recognizing that we all have something to offer regardless of our age.
Exactly.
And speaking of challenging perceptions, the article makes a really interesting point about ageism in our society.
That's a big one. It's everywhere.
It is. They challenge the idea that aging is synonymous with decline and irrelevance. They urge us to see it as a time of continued growth, wisdom, and contribution.
It's about recognizing the unique strengths and perspectives that older adults bring to the table.
Exactly. And advocating for a more inclusive and supportive society that values older adults for who they are and what they have to offer.
So how do we challenge those ageist attitudes both in ourselves and in the world around us?
Well, I think it starts with examining our own biases. Do we hold any negative stereotypes about aging without even realizing it?
It's about becoming more aware of those biases and actively challenging them.
Right. And it's also about speaking up when we see or hear ageist language or behavior.
We need to create a culture where aging is seen as a natural and valuable part of life.
Totally. And on that note, the article also emphasizes the importance of intergenerational connection.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. What do they say about that?
Well, they point out that our society has become really age-segregated,
It's true.
with younger and older generations often living in separate worlds.
You don't see as much interaction between different age groups as you used to.
Right, and they argue that this separation is harmful to both groups.
How so?
While younger generations miss out on the wisdom and experience of their elders,
Mm-hmm.
and older adults can get new perspectives and energy from connecting with younger people.
It's a missed opportunity for both sides.
Exactly. So it's about bridging that generational divide and creating more opportunities for connection and exchange.
Like what kind of opportunities?
Well, the article mentions mentoring programs, intergenerational living arrangements, and community initiatives that bring different age groups together.
I love those ideas.
Even just striking up a conversation with someone from a different generation can make a difference.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of the same human family,
Right.
regardless of our age, And it's not just about family connections either,
You're right. Friendships, neighborly bonds, and community ties are all important.
especially as we age.
How so?
Well, our needs and circumstances can change over time, and we might need to rely on a wider network for support and companionship.
That's true. It's good to have people you can count on.
So it's important to cultivate those diverse and supportive networks throughout our lives.
That makes a lot of sense. And, it brings up another key point that the article makes about planning ahead for the later stages of life.
Yeah, that's something we often put off, but it's really important.
What do you mean by planning ahead?
Well, it's about being proactive
Yeah.
and thinking about what kind of support we might need as we get older.
Okay.
So we're not caught off guard when those needs arise.
Like, what kind of things should we be thinking about?
Well, it could involve having conversations with loved ones about our wishes and preferences, exploring different living arrangements, and putting legal and financial plans in place.
That can seem overwhelming, but it's better to be prepared.
It is. It's about taking control of our future and making choices that align with our values.
And it's not just about practical matters either, right?
You're right. It's also about thinking about how we want to spend our time and energy as we age.
Yeah.
What are our passions? What brings us joy? What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind?
Those are great questions to think about.
They are. And the answers can help guide our choices and shape our future,
I agree. And ultimately, it all comes back to the core message of this article.
which is,
Aging alone doesn't have to be a time of isolation and despair. It can be an opportunity for growth, connection, and joy.
it's a powerful message.
It is. It's all about how we choose to approach it.
We have more control over our experience than we might think.
And the article gives us this concrete steps we can take to create a more fulfilling experience.
Like embracing technology, establishing a routine nurturing relationships, giving back and cultivating gratitude.
Right. It's a great roadmap for living a good life no matter what stage you're at.
I agree. And I love how they end this section by reminding us that we're not alone in this.
Me too. It's a comforting thought.
There's always hope, beauty, and the potential for connection and meaning, even in the face of adversity.
Beautifully said. And that leads us perfectly into the final section of the article, which focuses on finding joy in the everyday, even in the smallest moments.
It's the perfect transition. Are you ready to dive into that?
Absolutely. Let's explore that further in the final part of our deep dive. It's amazing how we've come full circle from feeling lonely and isolated to now talking about all this empowerment and these awesome possibilities.
Yeah, it really shows how strong and resilient we can be as humans. And this last part of the article really hits on that by talking about finding joy in those everyday moments, even the little ones.
Yeah, that part really stuck with me too. The article talks about those little things that we usually don't pay much attention to, but can actually be really meaningful. Things like, watching a sunrise, feeling the warmth of a pet's fur, or even just a stranger being kind to you.
Right.
It's like shifting your focus from what might be missing in your life
Yeah.
to all the good stuff that's still there.
Exactly. It's about being grateful for what you have instead of dwelling on what you don't.
Yeah.
And there's this one line in the article that I just love.
Oh, yeah.
It says, peace comes not from the outside world, but from within.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to think that happiness comes from outside things, like having lots of money, a big house, or a perfect relationship. But that's not really where it comes from.
It's more about finding that inner peace.
Right, no matter what's going on around you.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that becomes even more important as we get older because, let's face it, life throws us some curveballs.
Oh, yeah.
Health issues, loss, changing circumstances. It's all part of it.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
But it's how we handle those challenges that really makes a difference.
It's about finding those moments of peace and joy, even when things are tough.
Exactly.
This whole conversation has made me see aging in a totally different light. It doesn't have to be all downhill from here. It can be a time for growth and connection.
Absolutely.
Hopefully even joy.
All about your mindset.
It is. And the article gives us all these tools and tips for making it happen.
Like what?
Well, they talk about embracing technology, but using it in a way that helps us connect with others.
Right.
They also talk about establishing a routine, but filling that routine with things that bring you joy. And they emphasize nurturing those meaningful relationships, giving back to your community, and being grateful for the simple things in life.
Those are all great things to focus on.
It's a whole new way of thinking about aging.
It is. And I love how they end the article with this message of hope.
Me too.
They remind us that even in this big, crazy world, we're not truly alone.
That's such a comforting thought.
It gives you this sense of connection and community.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you're going to take with you?
Well, for me, it's the reminder that we have so much power to shape our own experience of aging.
Right.
It doesn't have to be defined by what society tells us or by our own fears.
It can be whatever we want it to be.
It can. And as the article says, peace comes from within.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. So to all our listeners out there, remember to see the beauty in the everyday moments, nurture those connections that matter, and never underestimate the power of a kind word, a helping hand, or even just a good laugh.
Those are the things that really matter.
They are.
Huh?
And on that note, we'll leave you with those thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep embracing the journey.
That's great advice.